Chapter 4. A Weird Sight. Nancy's heart leaped with excitement. Had she found the person for whom her father was searching? The woman raised her eyes, flushing slightly as she became aware of Nancy's stare. "I don't mean to be rude," the young detective said, "but I couldn't help admiring your beautiful compact. I've never seen one like it." The stranger graciously handed it to Nancy for closer inspection. With trembling fingers, the young detective unfastened the catch. Would the case contain the picture of a child? With mingled feelings of relief and disappointment, Nancy saw that the inside of the cover held only a mirror. After a few admiring comments, she returned the case and asked the woman if she were a guest at the hotel. "No, I'm not," the other admitted. "I came to have lunch with a friend. Are you spending your vacation here?" Nancy shook her head. "I'm staying at Deer Mountain Hotel." "Lovely place," the young woman remarked. She paused as she powdered her face, then went on. "I formerly lived only a short distance from there. My home was destroyed by fire." Before Nancy could inquire about the exact location of the house or the stranger's name, the woman arose. After replacing the compact in her bag, she left the room. Nancy was tempted to follow her, but could think of no pretext for reopening the conversation. She returned to the car and found her father waiting for her. "You're late, Nancy. We won't have time to visit another hotel. I must get back to Deer Mountain for an important interview." "I'm sorry I took so long, Dad. I thought I had located the woman you're looking for." Nancy gave a detailed description of the jeweled compact which had attracted her attention and related the conversation with the young woman. "Every clue is worth investigating," Mr. Drew assured Nancy. "And it's possible this woman may not be so innocent as she seems." At Deer Mountain Hotel, father and daughter had a quick lunch in the grill, then parted. Nancy found her friends resting in their room after several hours of vigorous exercise playing tennis. "You were gone such a long while, we began to wonder what had happened to you," George said, as Nancy threw herself down into an overstuffed chair. "Tired?" "Oh, a little, and my hand is hurting me again." "Golf scores have been coming in all day," Bess reported. "But the last we heard you were still in the upper group." "There seems to be a lot of gossip in the hotel about your friend Barty," George remarked. "One of the golf players, the former state champ, practically accused him of cheating." Bess put in teasingly, "While you were away, Nancy, he telephoned twice. We told him you'd be back about 2:00. Nancy sighed. "It's after that now, so he'll probably be calling again. I don't want to talk to him. Let's go for a walk to the woods near the 16th fairway. I'd like to visit the haunted bridge." At once, Bess objected. "Oh, we shouldn't go there alone," she murmured nervously. "Now don't be silly," George chided her cousin. "You know very well there are no ghosts. It's only a story, of course." "Stories seldom originate out of nothing," Bess retorted quickly. "I know we'll get into trouble." Nancy and George promised they would be careful. Reluctantly, Bess followed them out of the room. By the time the girls reached the woods, Bess began to lose her fear and to share their zest for the adventure. "The bridge is down by the ravine, remember," Nancy said. "I can see something white among the trees," George replied. "Maybe it's the ghost!" Bess exclaimed. Nancy and George pushed on through the dense tangle of underbrush, with Bess bringing up the rear. They were close enough now to see the footbridge. It was old and in need of repairs. Nancy, who was in the lead, halted abruptly. Through the trees she could see something white flapping. The next moment, a moaning and a weird groaning filled the air. Bess gasped in horror. "The bridge is haunted!" she cried. "You can see the ghost waving its arms! Nancy, let's get out of here!" "Nonsense!" said George. "It's probably only a piece of white cloth fluttering in the wind." "It might be," Bess admitted. "But did you ever hear a piece of cloth moan and groan?" Nancy started to reply, but the words died in her throat. From somewhere up the ravine to their left came a fearful cry that rose to a screeching crescendo, then faded away into a tremulous wail. "What was that?" whispered Bess. "Maybe some kind of wild animal," replied George uneasily. "Perhaps," Nancy said doubtfully. "But what could it be? I don't think there's anything larger than deer in these woods." For several minutes the three girls huddled together, listening for the weird sound to be repeated. Through the screen of trees they could still see the white, ghost-like object moving its arms slowly to and fro. "Come on," Nancy urged. "We'll approach quietly and see if we can surprise the ghost." Bess pleaded with her companions to give up the adventure, but they paid no attention. Nancy, who was ahead of the others, moved stealthily forward through the woods, taking care not to step on twigs nor to make any sound which would betray her presence. Suddenly she halted and began to laugh. "Girls, Chris's so-called ghost is nothing but an old scarecrow." Moving slightly aside, Nancy pointed toward the bridge directly below. The girls were now close enough to see a tall, tattered white figure flapping in the breeze. "That was a good joke on us," George grinned. No longer afraid, they hastened down into the ravine to examine the scarecrow. It had been set up at the entrance to the narrow, rustic footbridge that spanned a creek. Evidently, the figure had been standing there for many months, because the white clothing was grimy and torn, and straw stuffing protruded from the shirt. "The scarecrow is so wobbly," said George, "that the slightest breeze or any vibration of the bridge causes it to move." Seeing the movement from a distance, "I suppose the caddies imagined the figure was crossing the bridge," Nancy added. "Well, I guess the mystery of the haunted bridge is solved," concluded George. "How do you explain the moaning and the groaning we heard?" Bess asked. "Did we imagine it?" "No," Nancy answered gravely. "Those noises were very real, and so was that terrible cry up the ravine. And we know none of them came from this scarecrow." "You don't suppose we heard the creaking of the bridge as it swayed in the wind?" Bess asked. "No," Nancy replied. "It's possible some prankster may be at work around here. Let's make a search." After the girls had investigated the area carefully, they were more bewildered than before. There was no evidence of footprints in the vicinity of the bridge. Apparently, no one had been there recently. "Nobody's around here now," Nancy observed. "But of course someone must have set up the scarecrow. But why?" "There are no fruit trees nearby and no crops to be protected from crows," Bess commented. "It seems pretty obvious that someone wants to keep people from crossing the bridge." "Shall we go to the other side?" Nancy asked. "The bridge doesn't look safe to me," Bess protested. "I think it will hold me," Nancy said. As she cautiously stepped onto the bridge, the rickety boards creaked. Bess shuddered. "Oh, Nancy, please don't go any farther," she cried. "There's nothing to see on the other side." The young detective, her hands clenched around the wooden railing, edged her way to the middle of the bridge. Beads of perspiration dotted her forehead as the shaky support swayed. Suddenly, the railing billowed outward. Bess and George gasped as Nancy paused, then deftly pulled the railing toward her. "Please turn back," Bess called. "Let's look for your golf ball instead." Nancy did not want to upset her friends and gingerly made her way back to them. "I'd very much like to find that ball," she said. "It's a prize one of mine. Jimmy Harlow, the champion, autographed it for me." The girls poked among the bushes and leaves for nearly 15 minutes but could not locate the lost ball. "Maybe it rolled into the creek," Bess suggested. Nancy, who wore a pair of sturdy shoes, scrambled down the muddy bank. After a brief search, she realized she was accomplishing nothing and was ruining her shoes. She decided to rejoin her friends who were watching from above. She walked along the edge of the creek, looking for a place where the bank was not so steep. Suddenly, her eyes lighted upon a metal object half buried in thick mud. Excitedly, Nancy stooped to pick it up. End of chapter 4.